Just quite a long if you just go through, just take a seat in the forward cabin. Welcome aboard Concorde. You can see it says fairly narrow aircraft. I'm probably not too far short of touching both sides at the same time. It's very sleek and slim to travel fast as it does, of course. Cruises at twice the speed of sound. That translates to 1,350 miles an hour. Big numbers, hard to relate to anything. Say that's faster than the speed of a bullet. You'll get an idea that plane is really travelling. It'll cover something like 23 miles in a minute. Flight time London to New York is only 3 hours 20 minutes. Yeah, time difference between the two cities is 5 hours. So you see, big attraction. They actually beat the clock when you fly in London to New York. Yeah. So if the first group wants to go forward, anyone? Anyone want to go to the flight deck?
We've got that.
Right. Yeah.
Captain's seat.
So go sit in captain's seat.
Hold your head on the roof. You go take his picture. First place is from where you start. Are you together? 3 crew. 4 engines, 4 throttles, maximum power all the way forward. Also, Concorde was the only airliner to have afterburners. These little white switches here operate the afterburners. That's a fire in the back of the engine. You use those to get off the ground, switch them off as soon as you're airborne. Then to go supersonic, you put the afterburners on for up to 15 minutes. Switch them off, the aircraft will continue to fly supersonically without the afterburners. Use a lot of fuel, but very effective. So instruments left are the same. Captains, first officers, they give you usual things like airspeed, altitude, height, compasses, direction. 4 engines, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 groups of instruments there. Undercarriage, that operates undercarriage. So when you put that down, you should get 3.5 grains, meaning the undercarriage is down and locked. The half of the grain is a little wheel under the tail. That operates the nose. This aircraft's got its nose up, it's in its supersonic shape. The trouble with that is, Concorde's got a very nose-up attitude coming into land and taking off. The pilots can't see past the nose. So to allow for that, the sloping glass slides down, disappears into the nose, then the whole nose forward here droops down. So for takeoff and landing, these 2 windows, this should be clear, would be the outside windows. One of the many challenges for Concorde was heat. So the higher up they go, the colder it gets. So at 60,000 feet, it's about -60, -65 degrees centigrade. The Concorde was so fast, you got hot. These windows would get hot when the aircraft's flying supersonically. So hot, they put a restriction on the maximum temperature on the tip of the nose of plus 127 degrees centigrade. That's in a -60 degree atmosphere. If you heat metal up to expand, so Concorde grew now about 10 inches when she was supersonic. A good way of showing that is where that little blue sign is. When the aircraft's flying supersonically, that opens up sufficiently you can slide your hand in that non-existent gap. And a bit of fun, a couple of aircraft on the very last supersonic flights before the aircraft retired, the flight engineer put his hat in there. So if you go to Bristol or Seattle, the Concordes there were hats trapped in the...
Very small windows there, yeah. They've never had an aircraft flying at the height that Concorde does. Obviously, you know, with it flying twice as fast as other aircraft, it's not a very good idea for it to fly at the same sort of altitude, otherwise it'd be forever catching up with the ones in front. So it does fly higher than other aircraft. In actual fact, most aircraft will fly about 35,000 feet. Concorde is actually about twice that, about 60,000 feet high that Concorde flies. That's about 11 miles high there. The engines are much more efficient at that sort of altitude. You're also above the weather as well, so it's a very nice, smooth flight when you actually fly supersonically on Concorde. The only other aircraft that will be at that sort of altitude will be military aircraft. Crew of those will be wearing pressure suits and breathing oxygen. Concorde's passengers just sitting in the shirt sleeves, sipping champagne. All whole world of difference out there, yeah. But, these nice seats here, we've got very good legroom on these seats, a good 38-inch seat, glassware, 3911 metal cutlery as well. It's also free wine and free champagne. And it's all special cellar wines that are only available on the Concorde flights. Food menu will be changed on a weekly basis. The wine selection will be changed on a monthly basis. So your regular business traveller to get a different experience virtually every time that they flew on Concorde. Let's come back to these windows as well. With them being so small as well, there's not a lot to say out the windows most of the time you fly Concorde. You're flying 11 miles high. You can also only fly supersonic over the ocean as well. You're not allowed to fly supersonically over land. All the time the aircraft is flying supersonically, it's generating this sonic boom. It's something that follows it like a footprint all the time there. Somebody standing on the ground as it flies over, we hear this double bang. So it's restricted to flying supersonically over the ocean only. So 11 miles high, over the ocean, not a lot to see out the windows most of the time. But it is quite often described as being virtually on the edges of space. You are that high, you can just about make out the curvature of the Earth, the height you're flying there. You see there's quite good damping on those there. Comes down very slowly there. Hit a bit of turbulence and these things fly open, you're not going to hit the things flying out there. You've got plenty of warning that something's going wrong there. But like I said, also when you're cruising, it's a very smooth flight, so you're not going to hit any turbulence when you're actually in the supersonic cruise. You can hit the turbulence on the climb and the descent, as normally if passengers are the same lumpy weather there. But you see now it's come down all the way there. You can see just how shallow they are as well. Only about a hand's breadth depth there. So there's not much actually you can fit in these. Nothing like these great big suitcases that you see crammed in the overheads normally, you know. From these low-cost airlines, you know, you get charged extra for your hold baggage, so you try to take everything in your cabin baggage. But Concorde, you can't get very much in those lockers there at all. You get your briefcase, get your handbag. That's about all you get in those overhead lockers there. And when you're flying Concorde as well, you don't put your coats in the overhead lockers either. You can't leave Concorde with a scrumple-looking coat. Do it all. Your coats are actually taken off you as you come on board the aircraft, and then hung up in the cloakrooms. What these things are, just behind me, and in the centre section as well, where the cloakrooms there. This bit is actually the original finish of Concorde. It dates from the 1970s. It has a very old-fashioned look to it. It's a very 1960s look of sort of formica, very old-fashioned look there. And you can see the age of this because where you've got this finish, we still have the ashtrays fitted. And how long has it since smoking has been banned on aircraft? They've long since disappeared from the seats. But, you see Concorde, we still have them fitted to the furnishings there. And like I said earlier, that's what your ticket price would cost at the end of it as well. So you can see they actually never got the money back from the mods just for the seats alone, never mind the rest of the mods as well. So that was one of the influencing factors for it coming out of service. But also they actually sent it up on a test flight after they'd done the mods there. On a little looping flight over the Atlantic there, just to prove it could still make the transatlantic crossing and come back. But it landed back from that test flight to the news that while they were in the air, 9/11 had occurred. And that, of course, affected the passenger levels there. It relied on businessmen for its traffic. After 9/11, businessmen, American businessmen in particular, virtually stopped flying, so the passenger numbers fell through the floor. It holds 100 passengers. Break-even figure is around 60. There were times when the crew were actually outnumbering the passengers. A limit to how long you can sustain those sort of losses. BA in fact were actually discounting some of the ticket prices, and that was upsetting some of the regular passengers as well. In fact, they paid full price for the ticket, or the company paid full price for the ticket, and somebody could come along and pay half the price and still get all the same perks and sit next to them there. It was upsetting a few of the regulars there. But the French had never operated it quite as economically efficiently as BA. They were the first to actually blink and say, no, we can't carry on operating at these sort of levels here. So they pulled out. But there was a cost-sharing element between the two airlines for research, development, spares, everything else. When the French pulled out, all that dumped onto BA. Airbus Industries very nice to put an extra loading on top of that as well. I think they were fairly keen to stop the flying, and so they could actually close the whole line down there and use the space for other developments. They haven't sold any new Concordes in 10, 15 years or whatever. So, very expensive keeping the whole line going for just a few aircraft in service. On flying Concorde, the older aircraft, of which this is in fact the oldest British Airways Concorde, within a couple of years would have needed life extension programs. you count the costs of those tens of millions of pounds per airframe. Those sort of passenger levels that we're getting, no chance of making the money back. They haven't got the money back from the mods, never mind committing himself to still further massive expenditure to keep the aircraft flying. So all in all, that's why they decided to pull the plug on the airline. I know Richard Branson was making noises about taking over Concorde flights as well, but I think that was, we're not too sure just how genuine it was. He certainly loved the aircraft, but any excuse to embarrass BA I think was also one of his games there as well. And also British Airways would never wanted to see anyone else's colours, particularly his, on these aircraft as well. So British Airways in fact still own all their own aircraft. These are only actually on loan to us here. On a transatlantic flight, it averages out at something like 100 gallons a minute of fuel burn on Concorde. About half the takeoff weight of the plane is fuel. 95 tonnes, 26,500 gallons. They do get the fuel to do a couple of other jobs as well. One of the more important ones though is for adjusting the trim of the aircraft. As aircraft fly faster, the centre of gravity, centre of balance of the aircraft will move rearwards. If you don't correct it, you have a nose down attitude. So you have to adjust the trim of the aircraft. Most aircraft will do this by the control surfaces on the tailplane of the aircraft. Concorde can do a similar thing with these flaps on the back of the wings here, but only at subsonic speeds. Supersonically, you've got to be super squeaky clean streamlined, so they have to go up level. To maintain the trim of the aircraft in supersonic flight, they're stuck on the fuel tank on the tail cone of the aircraft. As they're getting towards the speed of sound, they start pumping fuel towards this tank at the back, which rebalances the plane internally. So supersonic flight, the trim is maintained by the flight engineer, moving the fuel around the fuel tanks. Burning fuel all the time is doing this, but you've seen his panel as well. It's a very complicated panel up there, yeah. Back in the engines we have these clamshell doors. These can move different position. Once the aircraft is up and away, those doors will open and enlarge the rear chamber, just make the engines that little bit more efficient. And then they can come into play again after landing to help provide reverse thrust with the to assist the braking of the aircraft. In that case, it's around.